The College of Veterinary Medicine is embarking on a process to reimagine the DVM curriculum. The goal outlined by Dean Baker is a learner-centered curriculum that prepares career-ready, high-value graduates and is attentive to costs to both students and the college. In the spring of 2017, a small working group was tasked with the objective of prototyping a couple examples of what are being called CHIPs. CHIP stands for Competency-Based, Holistic, Integrated Progressions, and could be thought of as units of instruction or learning modules. The process outlined here is an attempt to distill some of the main phases and general timeframes we walked through as a team. The goal of generating an informed outline of key milestones in the CHIP design and development process is to share key findings, make recommendations, gather feedback, and generate a framework for CHIPs to be built. This process is built on existing frameworks such as the ADDIE model for instructional design, backwards design, and the first principles of instruction. It also borrows language from design thinking. We narrowed this process down into 3 main phases, each of which could take a month or so to complete. The 3 phases are define, prototype, and iterate. It is important to note that the competencies should be identified by the curriculum committee for the CHIP prior to it being developed. This is important as these competencies will drive the instructional design decisions made for each CHIP. It will also guide alignment between the CHIP objectives, the competencies, the learning activities, the content, as well as provide coherency to the curriculum at large. Similarly, key team members for CHIP development work should be decided upon prior to the CHIP being developed. These members might include the CHIP moderator, the instructional designer, along with the content experts and the clinicians necessary. As you can see illustrated at the bottom of this general timeline, these team members may be needed at different points of the overall CHIP development process. For instance, a content expert or clinician may be needed at the early planning stages, while an instructional designer may be needed primarily at the points of defining objectives, creating and collecting materials, and building content in the instructional systems. In the initial define stage, defining the learning objectives, planning the learning activities, and what materials are necessary will help steer the design and development of each CHIP. It is here in the define stage where decisions will be made on what medium will best serve each learning activity. For instance, content previously covered in a traditional lecture might be offset into a digital environment where the learner can engage with it outside of class. This could free up valuable time spent in person for learners to engage in learning activities, with the benefit of having an expert on site to provide essential feedback at critical moments during the learning experience. After these critical decisions have been made, it is then time to begin taking those documented decisions and begin prototyping them into storyboards and media development in a learning system like that of D2L that can be tested to be in working order prior to the launch of a given CHIP. It is then game time, when the CHIP goes live and is moderated by a learning coach who walks with students through the learning experience. This CHIP moderator can also document things that are working well and the things that are not, so that CHIPs can be continually improved upon. This brings us to the last stage of iterate, where CHIP development teams can regroup, review, and make any updates to the CHIP as needed. We can't underscore enough how important it is that competencies be identified prior to the CHIP development to ensure that the phases of this process aren't impeded upon. These competencies will serve as essential landmarks that will help us know where CHIPs are headed. If we don't know where we're headed, how will we know how to get there? In conclusion, we want to invite you to share feedback on this process framework for CHIP development going forward. How could a process like this be helpful for building CHIPs in the months ahead? What kinds of support do you imagine will be needed? What challenges might be encountered? We want to hear from you. In the same way that this CHIP development process emphasizes continual improvements to assure that this learner-centered curriculum prepares career-ready, high-value graduates, and is attentive to the costs to both students and the college, we want to make sure that the CHIP building process itself is continually improving as it also supports these ultimate goals. Go forth now and build those CHIPs.